Alright, what's up guys? It's your boy Dillapillow, and today's the video we've all been waiting for. The top 15 albums of 2020. You know, I've been working on this list all year long. Been listening to albums, trying to feel out which ones I really love. The reason the list is 15 instead of like 25 or 50 is because I feel like these 15 were ones that I really loved, and that I'm really going to be coming back to for a long time to come. I didn't want to put in ones that were just like, I like these, but don't love them. So that's why I made it 15. I definitely could have listened to more albums this year. It's my first year being like super involved in music though, so I'm definitely going to have a better list next year, like more complete, probably longer as well. And I'll listen to more genres and stuff like that. So I'm definitely going to be doing a better job of that next year. But yeah, I'm happy with my list. I'm proud of it. I love these albums. You may disagree with some of the ratings, and that's okay. The music is just, what you prefer. There's no standard. So yeah, I'm going to go through a few honorable mentions before we start the list. First one, From a King to a God, by Conway the Machine. This one was close to making it in. I just hadn't heard it enough times yet to say that it deserves that spot. It's really good though. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't. One of the best Griselda projects of the year. Another one is After Hours by The Weeknd. I know a lot of people love this album. I think it's really good as well. I personally do not love the album though. It's not my favorite sound or anything like that. It's not something I find myself coming back to very often, but I do respect the production skill, the emotions that he portrayed. I still think it's a good album for sure. Also wanted to mention Unlocked by Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats. Fun project. They kind of just did their thing together. They had good chemistry on this. A couple of very replayable tracks. I thought that was worth mentioning. Another one is Positions by Ariana Grande. I thought this was good. Probably one of her weaker albums in recent memory, though. Still has some really replayable tracks. I think she did a good job with it. Overall, it's still good. I like it. Just don't love it. Maybe it'll grow on me over time, but after a decent amount of listens, it's not my favorite thing. But it was still pretty solid. Another one is Nectar by Joji. This is a really cool album to come out this year. I think it's getting to a point where it's going to be really great on his next album, but I think it just could be a little bit more complete in the vibe, the sound, just a little bit more straightforward. It's kind of inconsistent on this one. Still some really good songs in there as well. And the final honorable mention is Wanna by Gunna. I did a review of this initially a while back, and I really talked shit on this album, but it grew on me a lot. I think it's a cool album. It's one of the better trap projects of the year, in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like it because one is very simple, but he's just got a nice vibe to him. It comes around with some really good tracks. All right, starting off the list with number 15, it is Nightmare Vacation by Rico Nasty. I know a lot of people probably didn't hear this album. She's a relatively new artist. She's definitely growing. This is a really cool trap album. The production is crazy. It just goes crazy. It's got this crazy energy that she brings with it. She goes crazy on these tracks. She can rap. She can have a nice hook as well. She shows a few times where she really sang as well, which was really cool to hear. There's a couple good features on here. Don Toliver, Gucci Mane, Amine's on there. It's pretty cool. There's definitely some tracks that really stand out. My favorite off of it is Oh For Real. That is just a straight banger. It's got some like industrial kind of sounds to it too. It's really crazy. That's one of the best ones. A couple of other good tracks are Don't Like Me and Own It. I think those are two ones that really stood out to me. A lot of people like the track iPhone. I wasn't personally into that one, but it's just like another showing of how she can be very versatile. So overall, this was pretty great. But it's definitely not her best. She was pretty inconsistent on this, which is okay. I think it's a pretty early album. I think this is her debut studio album. So I thought it was cool. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't. I'll be coming back to it personally. But definitely more room for her to grow. I'm super excited for her future. Number 14 is the album Everything by Coda the Friend. This one may also be slightly unpopular. I know some people don't really like this one, but it's really a chill, vibey album. I thought the production's very chill. Coda's flow is very relaxed. He has some good hooks too. He can sing a little bit. It's not the best sounding voice, I would say, but I don't think he does a great job overall throughout this album. It's got a very specific mood to it. It's about just kind of love, chilling this summer. That's a good feeling to listen to. I think it released at a really good time in the year as well. Some good features on here as well. You got Joey Badass and Boz, who, although that track isn't really that great comparatively, it's nice to hear them on there at least because he's a New York City rapper. You got Kyle on there. He actually did a good job. Toby Lou is kind of how I found out about Toby Lou from that track. And that's one of my favorites. Morocco is phenomenal. Summer House is very good. Long Beach, another great track. And yeah, overall, I mean, this is a really solid album. Like I said, just kind of about vibing. Yeah, it could be better. I'd like to hear more from his writing in the future, because I think he's got something to do there. I think he's actually got some cool lyrics, and he could change up his flows a little bit more. But overall, I enjoyed this album. I think a lot of people did as well, so it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't. Shout out Code of the Friend. It was cool. All right, number 13 is The Price of Tea in China by Boldy James, with production by The Alchemist on this. This is a very smooth, very layered, very eerie album. It's got some really cool tracks. You got Boldy being, his guy. He's smooth as hell. He just raps about whatever he wants. You just feel intrigued to hear what he's saying. He tells some dirty stories on this too, and I like that he's being very straightforward with what's going on in his life and what happened to him, talking about it very well. There's some great tracks on here. We get some features from Vince Staples, Freddie Gibbs, I believe, as well. The track Surf and Turf is one of the best songs of the year. It was really close to making my top 25. Really great instrumental by The Alchemist on that track. Definitely worth checking out. The track Snort is also very good. And another good track to check out is Scrape the Bowl. So overall, this is a solid project for sure. Some really cool samples by The Alchemist. Everything comes together in a very smooth way. I would say it gets a little one-dimensional, and that's why it's not any higher. But I still think it's really good and definitely worth checking out if you have not. Number 12 is another album that features The Alchemist as the lead producer, and that is Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs. The Alchemist does a really great job on this one. I think better than The Price of Tea in China. It's just cool sampling, very layered as usual, but he has this old school aesthetic that goes with this. He's got pianos, he's got guitars, light drums. It's very beautiful in a way, but then Freddie Gibbs kind of brings his swagger, his dirtiness, his just smooth energy as well. To hear those things combined in the way they did was really cool. On this, you've got some good lyrical performances, some good cohesive, focused tracks by Freddie. But an issue that did arise for me and why I think this album isn't one of the best, although people really, really love this album, is that all of the features on this album, in my opinion, out-rapped Freddie. That is Rick Ross, Tyler the Creator, and Benny the Butcher. I'm not sure how this happened because I don't think all of these are better rappers than Freddie. And I think Freddie's best verses this year were not on this album. They were feature verses. I'm not sure why that is. I would say that maybe this production style isn't perfect for Freddie and for what his energy represents. I still think this was a good album. I still think some tracks like Scotty Beam were very good, as well as the tracks Frank Lucas and Something to Rap About. But those were all the tracks that had features on them. So that's kind of what left me hanging on this album, because as good as I think it is, I feel like the tracks that I actually came back to were the ones with the features, and I came back because of the features. I'm not saying Freddie did a bad job, because he didn't do a bad job. He still did a good job on this album. I personally just don't really love this one, maybe because it's not Freddie's best. I think he has a lot better albums, and that could be why. But overall, I mean, I like the message. I like this vibe. It's cool that he did something a little bit different, and I like it still. I definitely will be coming back to this album, and I do think it's great, and I love it. But it's just like, that's why it's only 12 on the list, in my opinion. But it's still pretty good. It's still good. Number 11 is Miles by Blue and Exile. Exile does a great job in production here with some beautiful, beautiful beats, some great sampling. And when you get Blue on this track, you're going to get some really well-written tracks, great flows, great stories being told. If you're looking for pure rapping, this might be the best of the year in terms of that. I mean, Blue is great at this. He does a phenomenal job on this album, as does Exile. I think they come together super well. This album is mostly it's a tribute to Miles Davis, but also about the journey that these two have had together. They made an album together back in 2007. For some reason, the name is blanking in my head right now, but it's a good album if you haven't heard it. And yeah, this also is packed with features, a bunch of different features that you wouldn't hear on a rap album usually, which is great. Some really, really great tracks on here, like Miles Davis is one. Some other good tracks are When Gods Meet, Troubled Water is another one that stands out. There are a lot of very good tracks. However, what it comes down to at the end is it's a little too long. I think like the last 5 tracks kind of just got a little dull, maybe a little bit too repetitive in flows and kind of sounds. That's the only thing that brings this down. But it's still really good. I just wish that there wasn't as much. It's an hour and a half long, which I'm not saying that the actual length is bad, because you can do an hour and a half album and make it good, but I think it just overdid it, oversaturated the sound and flows a little bit, in my opinion. So I got a little bit bored of it in the last half of last quarter of the album. But it's still really good. I think that some of those songs are great as well. That just maybe that the order that they're in doesn't benefit them. But overall, pretty great album. Number 10 is No Pressure from Logic. This is a reunion of Logic and No ID. No ID does a great job with bringing back some classic Logic boom bap beats, some cool keys, as well as the classic narration that comes from The Incredible True Story. Although No ID did not produce that album, it's nice to hear that. It's a return to form for Logic. He's spitting. He's got great flows on this. I wouldn't say these are his best hooks, but yeah, it's a sequel to Under Pressure, one of my favorite albums ever, and it's about, Logic's made it now, and it talks about, the struggles that he's faced as being a successful artist, and he wants to step away from that and have no more pressure on him. So I think he does a great job of doing that and displaying that feeling on this album. A couple of the best tracks, in my opinion, are GP4, Celebration, Heard 'Em Say, and Dad Bod is a great track as well. They're all very unique in their own ways. One thing that this project does have is it is also, like, some of the tracks are just a little too long, and I'm not sure what happened there exactly, but it's just, like, gets to the point where I'm like, this song should be over by now. That I love this album, I really do, and that's the only reason it's all the way down at 10. I had it as high as like 4 or 5 at one point, but yeah, just when I'm re-listening to it, I come back to these songs and I'm like, they just need to be over right now. So that's why it's a 10. Still a phenomenal album. Some amazing tracks on there. Really great to hear Logic go out like this. Number 9 is Limbo by Amine. This is one I didn't really think would end up this high on my list, but it did grow on me over time. I loved it first listen, and then it kind of grew off me for a little bit, but then it grew back. And the bottom line is, Amine just had a lot of fun with this. I think that really shows in these songs. He had a lot of fun with this. He's doing what he wants to do. This is kind of just an album about, where he is in life right now. He's successful, but he wants to get further, and going back and looking back on his life, where he's from and stuff like that. It's pretty simple in that way. I like a lot of these tracks. I think Pressure in My Palms is one that stands out. Compensating as well. Fetus was in my top 25 songs of the year list. These are all great tracks. There's a couple of great features on here, like JID, Charlie Wilson, Vince Staples, Slow Tie. Like, they all did a great job. They came together super well. I think this is a really fun and just enjoyable album. I think this album has very high highs, and I love some of these tracks. Like, I really love like 7 or 8 of these tracks. But there are some lows, which is why it's at 9. I just think that some of these songs were a little bit low effort in the end. And like I said, he was having fun. I just think some of them could have been redone to make a little bit better or just add more. But it's a good direction for Amine. It's his best album yet. I'm excited to see where he goes next, because he seems like a very genuine guy, and I love to hear that. Number 8 is Spilligion by Spillage Village. I came into this album thinking this was going to be the album of the year because the singles were so good. It didn't end up being that way. I was let down a little bit by this album. I still think it's phenomenal, but it lacked in terms of production at points. There was some really great production, but there was some weak production. However, all the members performed well of Spillage Village. They all did a good job. In my opinion, it's mostly about religion, weed, and just kind of the world ending. I think they did a good job of putting that message across. I think they have good chemistry for sure. Some really great tracks. Like I said, the singles were phenomenal. Baptize, End of Days, Happy. All of those were in my top 25 songs of the year list, as well as Shiva, which was an album cut. And I think those ones are just so high above the rest of the songs that's why it falls down to 8 because, to have 4 songs in the top 25 is like crazy, but none of the other ones are anywhere close is the problem. It's a little bit inconsistent in quality. I think that they could have done better, and I love this album and I come back to it quite a bit. I even have a Spillage Village shirt because a Spilligion shirt. I like this album a lot. It just had some inconsistency issues. This is why it's not all the way up there, but I still think it's really good. Number 7 is Pray for Paris by Westside Gunn. I know a lot of people aren't really into Westside Gunn's sound, and I'm not necessarily into it either. But this one was just really cool to hear a Griselda member do something like this. It was just kind of beautiful. It has this beautiful, majestic production, and it's kind of set in this theme where it's like an auction in Paris, and then they're kind of just living this luxurious life. But it also has this dirtiness that Griselda brings. To hear this is, super cool. I've not heard an album like this year. I really love a lot of these tracks as well. I think this is Westside Gunn's best album. I think he really just matches this sound more than I could have expected, and it came together super well. This album is loaded with features. I couldn't name all of them, off the top of my head, but some great tracks on here. George Bondo, 327, 500 Ounces, Versace. These are all really, really good tracks, and most of them do have features in it, but Westside Gunn performs just as well as all the features, in my opinion. Freddie Gibbs' verse on 500 Ounces is really good. French Toast is another good track, too. It has Wale on there. And, yeah, everybody really, did a great job as a feature. That really helped the album as well. I will say that the end of the album falls off just a little bit. It doesn't keep up with the same quality as most, the first 3 quarters or so of the album. But I still think it's really good. That doesn't really bring it down for me. I think this one got really close to being in the top 5 in my list, but just a little short. But I loved this album. Number 6 is Savage Mode 2 by 21 Savage, the best trap project this year, in my opinion. Metro Boomin, 21 Savage, they've, done a lot of projects together, and I think this might be their best. Really impressed by this. It's the sequel to Savage Mode. Doesn't really have that same feeling, but this is some of Metro's best work. This bass is booming. It's got this eerie sound. It's got Morgan Freeman on it. Come on now. That's crazy. Just some, great performance by 21 as well. He's got his one-liners. He's got his dirty flow. His hooks were pretty simple on this, but they were effective, so it's okay. It doesn't really have a meaning to it. It's just kind of, different set of vibes and stuff. That it's a good collection of songs. I wouldn't say that there's anything that makes this kind of stand out as an overall feeling or anything. I just think it's a great collection of tracks. They're all super well done, in my opinion. Not a lot of features on here, but there's some really good tracks, like Rich, I Can't Say That Shit, is a really good track. No Op Left Behind is one of my favorites, and R.I.P. Love is a really good track as well. I think there's a few in here that were maybe a little bit weak, but not really. For the most part, this doesn't really let up. It stays pretty consistent with the level of quality on these tracks. All of them are very replayable. They can get you hyped. They could be like R.I.P. Love, where you 21 kind of goes deep with something, and it has a really cool beat switch in the middle. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can find on this album, but overall you're getting really high quality tracks, and that's what I love about it. All right, moving into the top 5. At number 5, I have Burden of Proof by Benny the Butcher, with production by Hit Boy, which was really cool to hear. Hit Boy always is phenomenal. He had a great year. Does some dope samples on this album. I think he did such a good job. To hear a Griselda member, working with a guy like Hit Boy, that's a game changer. That is a game changer, because not all of, Griselda's, albums are super entertaining in terms of production. They all kind of fall in the similar sound, but this one, Pray for Paris, they really stand out. And that's great. That's why I love them more than the others. And Benny only releases one album a year, whereas Conway and Westside drop a few. So you just get better quality from him, in my opinion. That's why this one's highest of the Griselda albums. It's really cool to hear Benny open up about drug dealing, money, finding happiness in life, being famous, having to deal with that. He goes into a lot of that. He has some great features on here as well. It all comes together really well. A couple of the best tracks are One Way Flight, Famous, Thank God I Made It, these are some really, really good tracks. I think he really opens up and does a great job on these. And in my opinion, this album does not let up. It keeps the quality every single track. You could love any of these and have it be your favorite. He does a phenomenal job. Great features on this one as well. Overall, this is a really, really good, consistent, solid album. At number 4, I have Run the Jewels 4 by Run the Jewels. They did a great job with this. I mean, the production, you're going to get a pretty similar sound with them. The bass is booming. It's got like a slight industrial feel to it. It's very unique in the rap area, hip-hop area, so they do great with that. Their individual performances are incredible. They can rap like pretty much no one else in the game. Like, they really are next level with their bars. Their writing is phenomenal. Their hook game is not the best, but they had a few feature artists do some feature verses to really help these songs pop even more, which was a great touch going into this racism that's going on in the United States, police brutality, stuff like that. You know, this came out at the perfect time in the year. That's why I think it's so good. They had this ready, and then George Floyd passed away, and this album came out. And it's just they had already, been cultivating this movement, and it's just to get it out there at the perfect time like that is really important. That's why I love this album so much. There's a lot of phenomenal tracks on here. Just to mention a few, Out of Sight is a banger. Just is very good. And Never Look Back, Pulling the Pin, really, really great tracks. I love all of them so much. And yeah, this is a really, really good album overall. No let up in quality at all. They are consistently saying something great. They're talking to us. They're making it interesting. I wouldn't say it's the most replayable album. This is the one that's in my top 5 that probably doesn't have that much replay value on individual tracks. But man, it's a great, great album overall. They say such great things. That's why I love it so much. Number 3 is the album Super Good by Duckworth. I'm not sure. Not many people heard this. I'm kind of like an early adopter for Duckworth, I would say, because I've heard some of his other albums. This is his debut studio album. The production is really good. It's a switch up in his sound, actually, but it's a really nice R&B kind of pop groovy album. It's really groovy. It's one of my favorite albums to listen to just be in a good mood and just dance. That's why I love it so much. I think his individual performance is phenomenal. He has great vocals, great flows as well. Keep it super interesting, just gets you moving. I think that's what it's all about with this album. Very vibey, some phenomenal tracks. There's some features from artists who aren't necessarily big name household names or anything other than Earth Gang, and they do a great job to add to the album as well. There's a lot of different moods in these tracks, but it's mostly about love, and I think he does a really, really good job throughout the album. Some of the best tracks in my opinion are Money Dance, Super Bounce, and World on Wheels, but honestly they're all very good. So I might say my favorite is Super Bounce, but other than that, like, they're all so good that you could have any favorite on this thing. It's just a consistent vibe that keeps coming on this album. Each track is really good on its own, and this is just such a great album that if you haven't heard this one, please do listen to it. Number 2 is Song Machine by Gorillaz. This is an amazing album. I've begun listening to Gorillaz throughout this year. I've been doing these reaction videos the whole year, and I wasn't sure what to expect because they bring something unique every time. And this was, in my opinion, like one of their peak performances. They really came together well. There's a feature on every track that each one adds to these tracks. There's so many different emotions. There's so many different moods in this album. In a way, each track is a masterpiece on its own. And it's like you can listen to each track on its own. I think that isn't what they intended. But I listened through to it, and the way they set this order, it definitely means something. There's a story being told here about being alone, about these strange times, about the feelings that you feel, depression, anxiety, stuff like that. Money, the search for money. And they didn't just do that, just because. There's a purpose to that, in my opinion. It's really representative of 2020 as well, in my opinion. I think that there's so many great tracks. Honestly, there's so many great songs. I think the only one that's not great is Strange Times, but I think it's just an intro, so it's okay. My personal favorite is Friday the 13th, but they're all so good that it's not like anyone stands out that far from the rest of them. And this album overall is almost flawless. I think Strange Times is a slight flaw at the beginning. But in terms of the instrumentation, the overall production on these tracks, the vibes, the emotions, they just didn't miss in that area. I mean, it comes together super well. It's really well done all around. It's one you can keep coming back to. It's replayable. It's got everything that you're looking for in an album for sure. All right, my number one album of 2020, one that I'm super passionate about. I love this album so much. I know a lot of people really don't like it, and I completely understand why. 3:15:20 is my 2020 album of the year. Since I heard this, it just was incredible to me. You know, Gambino puts this blank cover on here. He puts times to represent the songs. He doesn't have song names. You know, trying to interpret that is why I love this album so much. I can understand why it's not attractive to a lot of people because of that. Every time I listen to this album, I find a new meaning. I find something new. It's so enjoyable to listen to, in my opinion. People will say like the mixing's not great and the production's weird and stuff. I don't agree in that area. I don't think there's a set of rules that it's supposed to follow. This is basically just Gambino letting out all of his emotions, telling us a story in a weird way that maybe we're not supposed to understand right now. It's just a moment in time. It's just a date, 3:15:20. What does that represent to you? It can represent anything. To me, this represents the start of the pandemic, you know? I hear all kinds of meetings related to that, although how could he have known it was coming? He couldn't have. I don't know. There's lots of different stories being told on here. I mean, one of my favorite songs of the year, 1238, is just an incredible story about love and psychedelics and finding your love, your dream love, and living to your dreams. And it's just like, there's so many layers to it. Algorithm's another one. There's so many layers to it. People will say it's like a corny meaning, but I really like that track. There's some great features on here. Ariana Grande's on here. 21 Savage's verse is incredible. This is just a really great album overall. A couple other great tracks are 53:49 and 35:31. I know it's hard to remember those titles even for me, but each track, in my opinion, is so phenomenal on its own. Some of Gambino's best singing, lyrics, rapping. You can find so many good things on this, and that's why I love it so much. Like I said, every time I come back to it, every time I listen, I'm finding something new. It's so intriguing to me. That's why it draws me in so much. And I can understand why it being so unknown, so mysterious to some people can push them away. It's the opposite feeling for me. That's why it's my album of the year. And it's just like such a unique piece of art. And that's what makes it stand out to me. So that's my list for this year's albums of the year. Let me know your top 5, top 3, your favorite album of the year in the comments. Thank you guys for all the support. This is, this video took me forever to make, honestly, but I'm really happy with how the list turned out. So I'd appreciate if you dropped a like. Make sure you're subscribed as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.